Welcome to episode 7 of Calm Down with James Eade. I'm James Eade, and I'm trying to calm down myself. And I'm also trying to help other people calm down, because I think people are just too uptight right now. Today, it seems like everywhere I go, people are on edge. And it's hard to say a word to another person without getting in trouble because people are wound up. They're too uptight. So, how do we calm down? I wasn't taught how to calm myself down when I was young. And as I got older, I kind of trial and error figured out ways that worked for me. And deep breathing is one of those things that works for me. If I take a deep breath in and out, I'm bringing in good energy. I'm letting out the bad stuff. Usually 1, 2, 3, however long it takes, a couple of deep breaths will help me calm down. But what works for me may not work for you. What works for you may not work for me. So find out what works for you. That's the message that I have in Calm Down. The episodes that we're doing are giving you different tools, different techniques, and it's aimed at everybody because everybody needs to calm down. But it's also aimed at addicts and people recovering from addiction, because I do have an ulterior motive for telling you about how to calm down. And it's because I want you to buy this book, Freedom, Your Path to Recovery by James Eade. And this book was written by me and tells my story of how I bent my knee to the tyrant addiction and how I stood up again, brushed myself off, held my head high, and looked people in the eye. It's possible. This is what recovery means to me, to regain the power of choice, to be able to do things that I want to do because I choose to, not because I'm compelled to. And when you're subject to compulsions and urges that you can't resist, these are the types of things that it's a misery beyond description. It's just kind of demoralizing, incomprehensible. And it's just one of those things that we don't think we can escape from. But I'm here to tell you, you can. And how we escape from the types of things that we experience when we're in the throes of our addiction is pretty much the subject of how we calm down. And sometimes when we are agitated, we have to become aware that we need to calm down. And I have a senior correspondent from LA who's really good about telling me what his latest gripe is. And then we try to work on how we can calm down, because it's definitely something worthwhile, worth getting worked up about. Except for people like me, I can't afford to get all worked up about this stuff. I have to remain calm. All the best decisions I made were when I was calm. When I was anxious and agitated, I never made good decisions. So let's hear from our senior correspondent and buy this book. Welcome to Calm Down with James Eade. And this segment of the show features our senior correspondent from Los Angeles, Rick Rosner. I'm going to bring Rick on now. Hi, Rick. Thank you for joining us. And I was wondering, is there anything that you wanted to talk about today that's been upsetting you, or is...
Yeah. It started last night. Okay. Because if you looked at the pre-market stock market information, you could tell that we were going to have a bad day on the stock market.
True.
So before the market even opened this morning, I tweeted, "Fuck you" to everyone cheering for and trying to make a huge market crash happen to help Trump. Yeah, this coming morning will be bad, but you want it to be even worse, you dicks. Trump, of course, owns most of the worst point drops ever on the Dow. And then I threw up a chart of the 20 biggest one-day point drops. And this tweet just did a huge amount of business. Like 130,000 people saw it. And I don't know, like 1,400 people liked it. And then, of course, a ton of conservatives commented on it, almost 600. And almost none of their comments were on point.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them were like, how can you blame Trump for this for today? And it's like, I didn't. I just said that historically he had a lot of big drops. And like so many of the tweets responding to my tweet got it wrong, didn't understand what I was tweeting, even though it's pretty straightforward. And then in the few instances when I said, I didn't say that, and then everybody said, oh, well, I didn't read it right, sorry. And
never mind.
Okay, so I guess I'm annoyed at the ecosystem, the social media ecosphere or space or whatever that that makes it possible to function without critical reasoning skills. I'm a victim of having taught and taken the SAT, and I've looked at, I don't know, more than 100 SATs and PSATs. And they all have a section called reading comprehension. And it's the most hated section of the test. It's the most time consuming. It's a big pain. But it tries to measure whether you can read a paragraph and understand what the paragraph is saying. And, I get pissed when nobody has that skill. Like, it's not doing me any good. I can read a paragraph and I can get the main points out of it. What good does that do me if nobody else can do that? It's like when I get pissed in traffic, when I see a handsome blonde man or a cute blonde lady driving, a $120,000, deluxe Range Rover or some like exotic, Mercedes SUV, and I know that they have an entire set of success mechanisms that I can't use. That they're probably not that smart, but they're cute, they're charismatic, they're blonde. I'm not any of those things. All I can do is use my reading comp skills and my mediocre comedy skills and have like mid-level success. Not that I'd want a Range Rover, but I don't get to have one. So I resent people who have, who occupy different ecological niches, the cute jocks, the cheerleader niche, while I have to stay in the nerd, desperately scrambling niche. So I hate this ecosystem, Twitter and other social media, because you don't have to be smart, you don't have to understand anything, you just have to keep frickin' typing. And that's what I do too. A lot of my tweets aren't smart, most of them aren't. It's like a liar, you're full of crap, loser, weirdo. And there's a lot to hate about. We didn't even have this space, when we were kids in the 60s, the 70s. Sure. If you wanted to diss somebody, you had to do it to their face.
Yes. Or over the phone, but that was
and you could not long distance because your parents wouldn't let you pay for long. They wouldn't let you. It cost like $1 a minute to call somebody an a-hole in Cleveland. Plus, you didn't know anybody in Cleveland because you didn't have social media.
Yeah, absolutely. But it sounds like you have a lot of followers. So
at one point, I figured out how cheap it was to buy fake followers. This is about 12 years ago. You could buy 5,000 fake followers for $1.
What?
You send $1 to an SEO company in East Asia, and the next day you've got 4,900 followers, and some of them evaporate over time, but some of them stick. And at one time, I had close to 5 million followers, almost all of them fake because they were so cheap, for less than $1,000, 5 million followers. And then Twitter went public. And before they went public, they had to clean up their numbers.
Wow.
And so I was in the top 5 in the world in number of followers purged. It was like Obama Avril Lavigne, and me. And it wasn't like Obama was buying, they weren't
Right.
buying fake followers. It was a way for people to pay honor to them. They would buy followers on their behalf.
Oh, I didn't realize that was even possible. I'm getting educated here.
It was a crazy time. And, you know, I still have some left over from that time.
And you're getting responses, so those are obviously not fake. Those are
Well,
people
who
that
knows? You know, I haven't run an audit in years to see, you know, there used to be companies that would tell you how many of your followers are real. And even that was a bullshit company because they'd give you bad estimates unless you paid them for a better estimate.
Right. So here's this nonsense, and if you want some better nonsense, pay us.
Yeah.
Well, you know, let's see, there's a gripe about reading comprehension, and there's a gripe about people rooting for the stock market to go down so that it will help the Trump candidacy. Now, which gripe is the biggest gripe to focus on right now?
The second one, because the first one got kind of taken care of in the back and forth of earlier today. That's old news.
Okay. Reading comprehension is a problem. There's no question about it. But people rooting for bad things to happen.
All right. So that, as a general thing, I connect it to the sportification of politics, where the 24-hour news channels and other news sources, each with their bias, exist in their news space, where it's only news if you can pump up your side and diss the other side.
Right.
Which is like a sports coverage kind of. It's fun when it's sports, when it's Lakers versus Celtics, and you can call Boston fans every kind of scumbag who will headbutt you. You know, Southies and Boston people can call LA, you know, superficial, Botox pumped, you know, curvy, you know,
come late, leave early fans.
Yeah, just like, and that's fine when it comes to sports, but when it's very corrosive when that stuff, you know, infects politics.
Yeah, and we're not getting straight reporting anymore. We're always getting spinned reporting that has a bias built into it. I think that's very true. But I think at the heart of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, at the heart of this is why people would wish harm on others so that they could get their way.
Yeah, like it's largely a liberal point of view that says that a lot of MAGAs vote against their own interests because Trump promises to hurt the people that they hate, which is a superficial critique that doesn't apply to most Trump voters. But I mean, it's probably true for some of them, but it's for the entire group, it's unfair. But one more problem with the news. We were talking about this on one of the earlier, you know, Pod TV shows, which is if you can't use a piece of news to pump up your side and go after the other side, then it's not really news. For instance,
it's not newsworthy.
For the past 25 years, tech and now AI and robots have been slowly, maybe not so slowly, eroding the world of work. And maybe it hasn't cost actual jobs, but it's been changing the jobs. So the jobs that are available now, a lot of them are shitty, like being a DoorDash or an Uber driver. Those are awful, awful jobs. You work endless hours. You're expending your own, you know, you're paying for your car, your gas, your insurance, your wear and tear. And if you do the math, which nobody dares to sit down after a day of Uber driving and figure out what they actually made per hour, because it would be freaking terrible. Yeah, and the Democrats don't talk about tech wrecking jobs. The Republicans don't really talk about it because it's a little complicated and you can't really blame the other side for it. So it's like it's a free floating issue that exists nowhere in the news sphere.
Okay. So the heart of the gripe then is not wishing harm on others for their own benefit. It is really comes down to, why can't we hear the truth? And
yeah, it's the crappy information space.
right.
It's like, okay, Blade Runner. Like, if sometimes on Star Trek, I'm not a fan of Star Trek because their version of the future is like too clean and sweet. And sometimes they go back to Earth. They have to go like before a tribunal or something.
Uh-huh.
And then they show like a plaza of the future. You know, it's surrounded by really cool buildings and happy people, clean. It's all, and you know, in futuristic clothing.
Yeah.
But then Blade Runner's like, F all that. The future is rainy and dirty, and you know, it's got some amazing technology, but it's hard to see behind all the hookers and the murderous, you know, cyborgs. And that's what information, it feels more like Blade Runner, super like dystopian, than it feels like a clean future.
And really, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the word that comes to my mind is dishonest. There's a certain level of
okay, so another movie, Minority Report. At some point, Tom Cruise is on the run, and he goes through like a subway station, and all these holograms with advertising targeted specifically at him jump out at him, and he's like ignoring him and having to deal with like all these, you know, projected people in between real people, and it's a huge pain in the ass. And that again feels like, you know, the internet space where, you know, you're dodging bullshit at every turn, or not dodging, getting hit by it and absorbing it.
And you're seeing ads that they think will interest you and get you to click on them.
And not just me. I've been getting pop-ups for Mother of the Bride dresses because my wife is a mother of our kid who's getting married, and somehow her searches have infected my searches. You know, what I do is I'll search for bikinis, and so I get bikinis popping up, which I find I like those. I needed to search for like male swimsuits to make a joke on Twitter. I needed an image, and that was a mistake because for weeks afterwards I was getting hit with, you know, guys in Speedos, and I didn't want those.
Yeah, not quite as interesting, right?
Yeah.
Well, so what happens when you find yourself upset about some news item that is clearly biased, or some response to your posting where clearly demonstrates a lack of reading comprehension?
So like I'll block small accounts, small MAGA accounts, you know, under 1,000 followers. I'll look at their feeds, and do they have anything original to say? I'll keep MAGA accounts if they're bigger, because those people are, you know, thought influencers. And I'll keep MAGA accounts if they have something original to say, even if I disagree with it. But small accounts that just parrot other people's bullshit, I don't have time for those. So I get a certain small amount of pleasure out of muting those accounts and imagining that I'm Jesus rapturing them to the ice moon of Jupiter, which is where I think all the jerks on Earth should be. They should be sent to live happy, comfortable lives just far away from us.
I see.
And so I do that, and then I'll take a nap. And my wife hates when I talk about this, but you know, one thing I do when I'm frustrated is I jerk off.
Yeah, and we've had this conversation before, and it's interesting to me because I never use that as a tool to calm down when I'm frustrated. But I'm wondering if I should try it.
I don't know. I mean, like I have a history where I was bad at sports when I was a little kid. I didn't like PE. I stayed inside at recess reading, and I read all sorts of stuff. There was less stuff specifically for kids back then. So I read adult stuff, which meant that I ran into sexy stuff. So by the time I was 9 years old, I was horny, which is too early to be horny. You can't do anything about it. And I think if you have sports, that at least keeps you distracted till you're like 12. And then if you're doing sports, you might be popular enough to make out with some girl at a basement party. But no,
reading isn't not the way to meet girls.
No, so from age 9 on until I lost my virginity at age 19 3/4, I was spanking it. That's 10 years of spanking. So I'm deeply invested in that.
I see. Okay. And so that is a way for some people to deal with their frustrations. Okay. Yeah. And there must be another way that you have of dealing with your frustrations that does not involve spanking.
That's right. Yeah, I have a really healthy dose of OCD. It runs in the family. My dad used to carry 40 pens around.
Okay.
He'd wear a sport coat. He had 10 heavy, like fancy pens in each inside pocket, 10 in each outside pocket, and like 2 pounds at least worth of pens. They'd eventually tear the jacket apart.
Right.
He had a pen obsession. He had a right angle obsession. Everything had to be, stacked. And so my obsession is I go to the gym, and then 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 I go to the gym. I have to work out at least 5 times a day. And I'm lucky because LA has a gym every mile or so. So I belong to 2 gym chains. I belong to Planet Fitness, LA Fitness, and I also belong to the Y. And I just, it's ridiculous, but I go to one gym, I do 12 to 25 sets. I go to the next gym. I go to the next gym. And, it's ridiculous, but maybe it also protects me from COVID a little bit because I'm masked up. And also, if I'm at each gym for only 8 or 9 minutes, then I'm not next to some jerk who happens to be contagious for more than a few minutes.
So what's the travel time between gyms?
3 to 4 minutes.
So it's not very substantial.
No.
So you add them up, you may be adding another 20, 25 minutes to your day.
I can hit the 5 gyms and be back home in 75 minutes.
Okay. And how do you feel after the 75th minute is over before compared to before you started?
I might be a little jangly because I've just worked out 5 times. I'll try to sit down and eat dinner, but I'm not hungry. And then I'm ready to watch an evening of watching TV with my wife, during which we work out some more.
Okay. So the workouts, I'm trying to get if these are the working out is helping you to calm down, or if it's something else, it's doing something else for you than that.
Well, it does help a little bit. It's like I'm too old to have been diagnosed with autism or Asperger's.
I'm in that same category. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm guessing that you're in saying that you believe that if we'd been 20 years younger, we both would have been told.
Drugged.
Our parents would have been told we're on the spectrum.
We would have been drugged. I'm almost positive. Yes.
Okay, well, I don't know about drug, but somebody would have sat my parents
or something.
Yeah. And people on the spectrum have certain physical, it's called stimming, like chewing gum, biting your nails. I pick it myself, which is
cracking your knuckles.
Stuff like that, where you maintain focus by running physical sensation through your body. And we're as autism people sometimes are more sensitive to like itchy clothes. Though I can't believe anybody can wear a wool sweater. That
I
is
know.
that's crazy. But I'd say, yeah, that the
I don't care
working
how
out,
good you look at it.
I do believe that the working out is soothing at some
Yes,
level.
yes. And there's a new word that I learned recently: neurotypical and neurodivergent.
Right.
And I think I would have been diagnosed as neurodivergent at the
Yeah.
least. And
the idea behind the terminology is the people who support that terminology are often on the spectrum themselves, and militantly so, saying, I'm fine. It's up to
yes,
you to get used to me. The same way maybe some deaf people, object to people who get cochlear implants. They say we have our own deaf culture. We're fine as we are. There's nothing about us that needs to be fixed. And neurodivergent just means that we think differently from the normals. Oh, you're frozen.
right. I have frozen. Okay. Frozen, Rick.
Okay. So should we use that as an excuse to wrap it up for?
Okay, here I am.
Okay.
I'm so sorry about that. Okay,
Right.
I was just really love to respond to that. People being militant about it. I go back to we're queer, we're here, get used to it, and it's like that kind of thinking. I really respond to that. I respect it. It's like I happen to be different. I think I process information differently. Okay, and I'm no longer apologizing for it. But the idea of using something to calm yourself down, that can be one of the things that I do, is to say, okay, I didn't interpret that the way everyone else did, but that doesn't make me a bad person. That doesn't make me someone who should be what's the word? Shunned. I'm just different, and different is okay. And one of the things that I've learned, and this has really helped me, is that I don't have to go around saying something to get into someone's good graces. I can be who I am, and whether or not they agree with me or like me it's none of my business.
That brings us back around to the horrible social media ecosystem, where always in the back of our heads when we're on social media is we're trying to tune our online demeanor to make sure that we appeal to the people that we want to appeal to, and the greatest number of people. And that's another horrible, like, little monkey on our shoulder.
Yes. Yeah, and I think the more we can free ourselves from that expectation of being liked, even, that idea that we have to get approval from others, all of that kind of stuff is very freeing when you decide you just don't care. I want to be authentically me. So we're getting the sign that Rick has got other things to do.
Okay,
so I want to thank you very much for joining us, and the inspiration that you've given me for how to continue to try to be myself and not get wound up when other people disagree with me or don't understand me.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay, that was I'm frozen again. That was Rick. Welcome to the next segment of Calm Down with James Eade. And I'm James Eade, but I'm going to introduce you to a yoga therapist that you should be familiar with now. We've gone through the yamas. We're going to go through the niyamas. And Yudhishthira, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jim.
And the niyamas are, the way I understand it, the yamas were the things not to do, and the niyamas are the things that we should be doing. Is that generally correct? Or?
That is correct. And again, the metaphor of weeding a garden and then planting the garden is actually a good metaphor, because the yamas are the weeds we want to pull out. The niyamas are the seeds we want to plant.
Very good. Okay. And so which is the first niyama that we're going to talk about?
Well, the first one we're going to talk about is called Saucha, S-A-U-C-H-A.
Okay.
And its English translation is usually purity or cleanliness.
Okay. Now, obviously, when you talk about cleanliness, I think of, did I take a shower this morning? But that's not the kind of cleanliness you're talking about, is it?
No, but did you take a shower?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to leave you to talk about enough about me. Have a great segment, and
All right,
I'll see
thanks.
you afterwards.
Hello, friends. The practice of Saucha is a little bit harder to get into than some of the other yamas and niyamas. And what I'm referring to is simply that we usually translate the word Saucha, S-A-U-C-H-A, into two English words, purity and cleanliness. Now, cleanliness is not so bad because we all appreciate the value of having a clean space around us, or having a body that's clean, of being around people who are whose bodies are clean, being in beautiful spaces. That all totally makes sense. Purity is a little bit more challenging. And if we were to take the word purity and expand it into a lot of synonyms, I think they call it a word cloud. And if you were to take the word purity and think about the images that come to mind for you, I'm just trying to point out the challenge of taking an English word, or even two, and saying, this is what the Sanskrit word means. That's the problem. And, you know, I just realized that I did not begin my timer, and I want to do that now. Okay, so when we begin with Saucha, the problem with the word purity, think about what it brings up in your mind. If you remember your high school literature, you will have read a book called The Scarlet Letter, and it involved all these very unhappy, very repressed people who were taking all of their judgment out on this one poor woman, and when none of them were free of desire. And so purity is really a tough word. And when it comes to sort of a more broader application, rather than just the Puritans, even the picture of monks and nuns sexually repressed, you know, in their cells, you know, distracted by that repression, doesn't really ring very true to what Saucha really is. And what Saucha, you know, here's the word that I end up using for myself that I think actually is a better definition. And it's the word desirelessness. So the lack of desire. So remove the desires. Plant the seeds within your consciousness of those qualities that you want to be there. And there you can plant the qualities of cleanliness and purity. When it arises naturally within you, it's a very different thing than trying to impose it from outside of yourself. So let's talk about the hard part first, because of the fact that when I go through my various versions of the Yoga Sutras. And remember, these yamas and niyamas all, the yamas are the first limb of 8. The niyamas are the second limb of 8 stages of awakening and moving towards a complete union with the divine. I'm not saying the word God on purpose, only because I don't want to limit my words to whatever words work for you. And so the idea of consciously moving through these stages begins with the intention of removing those things from our life that are keeping us from this return to our divine source, or the things that we need to do in our daily lives. And I don't mean just outwardly, but inwardly, to begin to plant the seeds that will grow into this garden of what Yogananda, my guru, called, excuse me, self-realization. This garden of self-realization is one in which we are naturally surrounded by the higher vibrations that come as we ascend the stairway from worldly awareness to the awareness of the divine. And so most people, most teachers, most gurus, most commentators on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali begin talking about, as soon as you come to this idea of Saucha, they begin with celibacy. And again, celibacy doesn't have a whole, it doesn't ring very well, doesn't sound true to me. It's not a term that I really relate to very well. And here's the thing about yoga practices, and especially in terms of my guru and this path of self-realization. For those of you who have read the autobiography of a yogi, repeatedly throughout that book, Yogananda refers to the practice of Kriya, Kriya, yoga. It's with a capital K. And Kriya Yoga is a way of transmuting or rechanneling energy. And these desires that lead us into the awareness of our bodies and the bodies of another, and the desire for that body and the desire to touch that body. None of these are necessarily wrong within a certain context, but the desire itself becomes the real challenge, and it becomes the problem because it distracts us from the truth of who we are. One of the fundamental principles of yoga is that we are a spiritual being in a physical body, and that our challenge, our goal, and this is where the yamas and niyamas really are a good starting place. These teachings begin to move us away from that misidentification of us as the body that we're in. That's very challenging. And when you get certain fundamental desires, they tend to be focused around certain things, drugs or alcohol, sexual desire, and greed. Those three things tend to really be the source of a lot of outward pull. That if I can just get enough money, if I can just get the right partner or the right many partners, or if I can just arrange things in my life in a way that's going to be the way I think they should be, then I'm going to be happy. So this practice of Saucha is really the practice of removing the desires that no longer serve you when you are ready to make forward progress towards remembering that you are a soul having a physical experience. And one of the hallmarks of truth in yoga is whether or not something is permanent and true. And so you might think about a conflict with another person. And conflicts can be resolved. So oftentimes, the things or the relationships that are broken, when they are healed, are stronger than they were before. It's true at the physical level. When a bone is broken and it heals, the place where it was broken is oftentimes stronger than the bone on either side of that break. And so it is for us that as we begin to move towards a remembering that we are in essence a spirit, it changes everything. And these stages that Yogananda, or that Patanjali refers to in his 8 limbs of yoga, are just going to happen for all of us. It's just a matter of when and in what lifetime they'll take place. And so this path of Kriya Yoga, in terms of Saucha, in terms of rechanneling this energy, is really about taking energy that occurs and appears within us, lower down in our bodies. I'm referring here to the chakras. This is not the time or place. I don't have the literally the time to sort of give you a background in the chakras, but many of you who are listening to this will have come across them already. But the lower 2 chakras are really focused on the outer world and basic desires. Again, there's nothing wrong with them. It's not that they are bad. It's only that if left on their own, those energies that we feel moving through us in the first and second chakra are going to draw us outward, and oftentimes into behavior that does not lead us to self-realization, but leads us to material body consciousness. So Saucha is really about beginning to intentionally choose to have this energy move inward and upward. So as we bring that energy inward and upward, our thoughts, our feelings, our desires become purified. Jim and I were talking before we started the recording, and he was talking about pranayama, about the intention with which he begins to consciously breathe, as being one way that he practices Saucha. And it's true. He intentionally plants the seed of purity within himself, purity of thought, purity of heart, cleanliness of thought, cleanliness of my feelings. And in doing so, he uses his willpower to plant those seeds deeply within himself. All of us can do this same thing as well. So when it comes to Saucha, it's helpful to understand that it really can be practiced at many different levels. One of the things I'm so grateful for is that my teacher, Swami Kriyananda, who wrote this book, Demystifying Patanjali, that when he speaks and teaches about Saucha, he talks about it in stages. And he doesn't begin with outright celibacy, which doesn't really have a good feel to it for most of us who are Westerners. But he begins by talking about external cleanliness. And so that does involve keeping the mind and the body clean, bathing regularly, of course. About internal cleanliness, and that begins to where we become aware of the thoughts in our head. I've shared with you some affirmations during these classes. We haven't done any chanting, but mantras, affirmation, prayers, chanting, these are all ways that we can keep our internal self clean and keep our thoughts of a clean and uplifting nature. And the thing that's required first of that is to also be aware of the thoughts and desires that come through your mind. The thoughts and desire, or the feelings and desires that come into your heart. And then to notice sometimes when those desires have their origins in the first and second chakra. And again, this is where greed and unhealthy sexual desire comes up. And so the other thing that we can begin to do is to avoid negative influences around us. It means that we can choose the company that we keep. It means that we can avoid conversations that are downward moving. I have a friend who has now left her body, but one of the things that she was most well known for, she was a beautiful teacher. Her name was Anandi. She was one of my first introductions to Ananda. And whenever a conversation began to drift into anything negative, she would change the subject and say, can we choose to speak about something else that is more positive? And so that's the nature of avoiding impurities around you. Choose your words, choose your conversations, choose your people. And when it comes to purity of heart, it means remembering that you are a child of God. You are a child of the divine. Jesus made this clear in his teachings that we are made in God's image. He wasn't referring just to the physical body, which Jesus had, of course, but rather to the Christ consciousness that was the Son of God that Jesus referred to. And finally, there is this matter of where do things properly belong? And so when a thought arises in your mind, choose to put it where it belongs. If it is a thought that is not serving you, that is downward pulling, then I encourage you by all means to find solutions. Pranayama is one. Meditation is another. Studying the scriptures like the Yoga Sutras. This is another way that we can really uplift ourselves and begin to move ourselves away from matter consciousness, desire consciousness, and move instead into a place where we are abiding in our true nature. I point you, just to close, to the very third Yoga Sutra. And that third Yoga Sutra is, Patanjali states it simply like this. When we are in the practice of yoga, then the seer, that is you or me, not the body, but you in the body or me in the body, then the seer abides in his or her own true nature. So as we remove these desires, as we practice Saucha, we naturally become purified. And we naturally are then in a place of union. It's just a matter of how we begin moving through it step by step. And as with all of the yamas and niyamas, it requires practice. And sometimes that practice begins in an outward way, but gradually it takes us to a higher and higher practice. So that's Saucha and desirelessness. That is to remove desires. That's really where I would point you in the direction of going with the practice of Saucha. It leads to purity, it leads to cleanliness, and it ends in this natural openness within ourselves to the divine.
Welcome to the final segment of Calm Down. And I want to introduce to you, my loyal listeners and viewers, Divya Lovewise, that wise yogi. And I would like you, at the end of every show, I'm a little bit agitated and worked up and all that kind of stuff. And I was wondering if there's something that you could do to calm me down. Could you just say goodbye to us in any way that you see fit?
Sure, I would
Oh,
love to.
I will take off and let you do that. Thanks again.
Okay. Well, bring yourself into a comfortable seated position, feeling your feet on the floor and letting your hands rest in your lap. Palms up or palms down is a great way to start bringing yourself back into center and focus with your own divine energy and letting go of anything that might have wanted to stick to us throughout the day that may be energy we don't want to carry throughout the day. So having this basic position, feeling grounded, even closing your eyes and taking a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And one of the ways we can bring ourselves back to center is observing with our senses what we can feel, the temperature of the air in the room, observing any sounds that you hear. Noticing any smells in the air. And then bring your awareness to your breath. As though you're watching it from the inside out. Watching the inhale wash into the body. And watching the exhale wash out of the body. Just like the waves of the ocean as they wash onto the shore. And if you find your mind still wandering, you can even place one hand on your lower belly and one hand on your heart so that you can feel with your hands this breath washing in and washing out. And with your mind's eye, visualize this inhalation and exhalation as an internal shower, clearing away your energy so that it's refreshed, it's rejuvenated, and it's restored. Releasing your hands into your lap, just give yourself a few seconds of pause in this return to peace, enjoying it. When you are ready, you can open your eyes, wiggling your fingers and your toes, feeling grounded in your body, grounded in the best part of yourself, and you can go out into the world and carry that best part in the forefront of your mind and your heart.